You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Well, then, hello, everybody. This is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. And I have with me someone who is so special, so gentle, so vulnerable, so deep. And this is Doreen Downing. And Doreen has a story about um, narcissism, abuse, uh, a history of hiding and not even knowing that she was hiding, which I don't know about you, but I know I can relate to that. And she's willing to share her story with us. And thank you, Doreen, for coming on my show.
Yeah, I'm totally here with you. And just want people to know right away that what I enjoy about our conversations, which we have had in the past, is that you and I are we love to inquire within, and
Right.
that's where we go.
Right, right. And so let's talk about going deep and going within, and what does that mean? So I call my process the empowering process, right? And that's because there is no goal. There is a, there is no, yay, I've made it. There is, oh, I've left that behind. Okay, I understand where that's from, right? Or, oh, I can show up so much more authentically me, but there's no, oh, look at something else just came up. When you do that, something else comes up because you're more capable of handling the deeper issues,
Mhm.
right? And so as you bravely peel back that first layer, and so we're going to talk about peeling that back, right? Um, it's you get this release and this relief of, oh, I put that suitcase down. I didn't realize it was so heavy. Oh, look it, I'm carrying another suitcase, right? Um, but it becomes more and more beautiful and faster and easier each
Mhm.
time.
There's a story that I know about what in psychology, when we're working with people who have that kind of baggage, that they get ready to leave the family and go out the front door and get launched in their own life, the independence. They take their suitcases, they don't go out the front door, and they keep marching around the living room.
Love it. Right? And you don't even know it. You don't
Right.
even know it. And the things that you rebel against, I'll give a quick little analogy. So, if anyone listens to my stories, there's some not very warm, fuzzy parental interaction with my father. And my father didn't even look like a nice man. He looked angry. He looked like his body was hunched over and he was down, right? So all of the weight that you carry with you, all of that anger that you carry with you changes you physically, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I remember being with my brother and his wife. They were like in their 20s. And them saying, you know, what a horrible person he is. He doesn't really engage with his children. He doesn't really love what is important in life. Fast forward years later, my brother physically looks like and walks like my father and is exactly the same way.
Mhm.
What you rebel against, if you don't heal that, you become.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of my story, actually, as a diabetic, and let me tell you how that relates. Because, and I really like this connection you made to our physical and our emotional and our upbringing. I would say that with my upbringing, it was not a lot of surrounded by love or neglect. So I learned to do the wall, protect myself. It's a great device. Don't get close.
Right? Right. Hey, I'm
Do not
okay.
get
I'm
close.
okay. You stay over there. I'll stay over here.
Yes, yes. But how I think I connected it to diabetes because my diabetes was about how my cells don't take in energy or, sweetness, actually blood glucose, that's about taking in good energy. And I think that that's how I connected my way of protecting myself went all the way to my body,
Right.
and that I pushed away any kind of good nourishment, good love.
Right. And, so I had ulcers at the age of 12.
Oh,
I had chronic constipation from the age of 8. I had lower back aches, anemia. I mean, none of this I have now, by the way, guys. None of it. None of it. Right. And did I go on a journey to heal my body? No, I went on a journey to heal my heart.
yes.
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 And what you said in the beginning about knowing ourselves is what I took, is that in going within to discover more of how we got to be the way we are and who we truly are at the deepest, most beautiful and fabulous level, that's where our journey takes us, I think.
That's been my experience, and I never want to throw my stuff on other people. I can just only tell you my truth from my experience,
Mhm.
right? Or something that I've witnessed others go through. And I just can't express fully enough how amazing it is when you know who you are, not who you think you are. I do have a training that I do, which is for people who are already enlightened. It is not for the novice because it really brings you out there, right? But there's an exercise in there that you guys could consider doing it. And that exercise is you write down really all of the things you think you are. I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a blah 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 blah. And then you peel that on the left side, and then on next to that you put next to each one. So as a sister, how do others see me? As
Mhm.
a mother, how do others see me? As an employee, how do others see me? And then next to that is like, well, what's really going on? Right? So how do I see me in that role? And so you start to see yourself from other people's eyes and then differently from there. So the point being, everything is just a perception. And when
Oh,
we get to
yes.
know us, right, and
Mhm.
love us, then we change our perception of
Yeah,
us, which
yeah.
changes my perception of you,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
right?
because you're perceiving from a different place.
Right.
And could I share an exercise
Oh,
that?
please do. Let's have fun.
Well, it only comes up with only 3 parts, but it's a journey, and I take people on a visual, kind of, I guess you might say, guided imagery. And it's about entering a park, and you can get more specific when you do the actual journey within, but it's the first person that you meet is the child. How old is she or he? What clothes is he wearing? What is happening right there, and what does she want to say to you? You sit down on that bench and you listen. Just listen. And there's no interaction. It's just listening to what this part has to say to you. And then you say thank you, and you get up and you move further, deeper into the park, and you see a tree, and there's a figure standing there, and that's your judge, your critical self, the part that's got their arms crossed. You know that, we know that. And so you have a conversation, just listening. You're not trying to make them go away. You're just listening, so that in a way, this is like what you're talking about, just gathering the information first. And then you say, thank you. Ooh, thank you for
Thank you for your
sharing.
opinion, right?
Yes, and that's an opinion. But you go deeper. deeper, deeper. You feel yourself being drawn somewhere in this fabulous nature scene, and you come across to a place, whether it's a meadow or a river or a brook, something that just feels like, I want to stop here. It feels so good. And there is where you meet, and you can say it in all sorts of ways, your spiritual self, your deepest self, your essence. What do you hear? What is the message that comes from this part? And then, of course, you thank that part and come out of the park. And so that's a way of going into and listening to the parts that are, you left me, and but those are you. So you get, and then the part that's critical. And then, of course, this, and a lot of people have never really met something as deep as their most, whatever you call it. What do you call it, Gail? This
Yeah,
deep inner
the
essence.
right, what do we call I guess, it's self with a capital S,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
Self with the capital S. And what's interesting is as I become more, and I don't want to use the word aware, but it's one that people can hang their hat on,
Mhm.
right? Because it's more than that. But as I become more open to the fact that I'm more than this third dimensional body, as I become more open to the fact that, um, you're more than, you may not know it, but you're more than this third dimensional. I see beyond the facade you put up,
Mhm.
right? And so do I see your soul? I do. But when I do that, that means the avatar that you think is you starts to disappear in
Mhm.
my eyes,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Because that's just a character, an archetype. So let's go into archetypes, an archetype that you've created, right? And we all have archetypes serve a purpose. I'm not saying they're bad, right? At all. But we all have archetypes that we lean into. Again, I said, you a sister, a mother, a worker, those are all archetypes. It's not wholly who you are. It is that role that you're playing at that point in time. The thing is we identify ourselves, capital S, as being that role. And
Ah, yeah, and it's not, yeah, that's not the truth, because
right,
yeah, all right. So this self, or the essence, as I call it, is, for me, that's where our real strength is, our wisdom, and all the beauty and the magnificence, I guess, just pure magnificence. And there's no doing. It is a being state. That's, at least for us here in this plane, I think most of us can relate to it being, right? Just being
right.
present, being here now, because we're doing a lot of that nowadays with mindfulness.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's being curious and open to letting go and discovering that what you believe to be true is not so,
Oh, yes.
right? As soon as we let go of that, and that's where the fear, where ego is so afraid, right? Ego wants to hang on to the known because ego's created the known, right? And so if you let that go, well, what role do I play, ego? Right? Right? If I can't be fearful, now what do I do? Right? So facing that, I will tell you a little story. Just before Christmas, um, I had a funeral for my ego.
Oh,
It was
I don't mean to laugh, but it tickles me.
right. It was no,
Yeah.
I was laughing through the whole thing. It was hilarious. I had a little casket, right? And this is I don't know if it was a meditation or a dream, but I wasn't awake. I mean, it didn't really happen, but it did.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there, and it was almost like a shiva because people were coming in, and yes, they brought food and whatever, and they would stop in front of me and say things like, I am so sorry that anger has passed on. It served you well, but it's time to go. I'm so sorry that fear has moved on. It served you well, but now it's time, right? Each person had a facet of ego to share with me that it's time to let it go. Now, does that mean I have no ego? I have to have ego. That's part of the human experience, right? But ego no longer is the boss, right? I will react or feel something. I don't even want to say conscious mind, but I will say, is this truth? Does this matter?
Mhm.
Is this have any effect on me, my soul, my essence? And if the answer is no, 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 then okay, bye, done. Let it go. Where in the past I would have gotten wrapped up in the story that was being made, trying to make it better, or trying to fit in, or trying not to be judged, or trying to judge, right?
Mhm.
All of those things.
Mhm.
So you have a history of not always, as me, not always being enlightened, is not always being
Mhm.
aware. What's some of the things that you had to face in your life before you finally went, whoa, this is not right?
Oh dear.
It's,
That's
pick a story. We all have so many. Pick one.
right. We do have so many. Well, it kind of goes along with what we're talking about, the roles I'm playing. I had a PhD and I stayed in school for years and years and years. I think it was not until 30 when I got my PhD, maybe even later after I did all the kind of post grad stuff that I needed to do, way into my 30s, actually, before I actually started my practice. And so I remember having the sense that I was putting on a white coat, Dr. Doreen, and I'm in my office and people are coming in and it's like, okay, this is a hysteric, right? Or is this an obsessive? Or is this, what is the treatment I have to come up with to, treat this? It was like, yeah, like this animal is coming in. I'm a veterinarian. I have to fix this animal.
Right?
And there was something about how I hid behind, I might say, you mentioned that in the beginning today, hid behind being a doctor, and that, well, doctor of behavioral health, not medical, but Dr. Doreen. And I hid that I had a fear, a terrible fear of speaking in front of more than a couple of people, so that in my office, just one person, I could listen, I can be with, I can help them, move through whatever treatment strategy I was using. But I had my own fear. So it's kind of just a little bit longer story here, but I'll go into it. I was asked to give a presentation, because I had done some research, and I said, "Oh no, I can't. I'm afraid of speaking in public." And the organizer put their hands on their hip, kind of like, "What, what the heck's wrong with you? You're a psychologist. Aren't you? Isn't fear your business?" It was like, "What's wrong with you?" And that was a turning point. So you're asking, like, when did you wake up? I mean, I think I've always been interested in inner life, and that's why I picked psychology anyway. But that's when I started my own journey to overcome my stage fright. And I went to Toastmasters, which for 7 years, which didn't really get at the inner. We're talking about the one who's in the middle of the park waiting to be discovered. So actually, that's when I started to realize that all the kind of trainings I was doing to be a speaker out in the world wasn't really helping me be more expressed in the truth of who I am. And so I did this wonderful inner journey, kind of the empowering process that you're talking about too, this discovery of where my true strength is. And that's, yeah, it's in the fact that I'm an introvert. It's in the fact that I have a much more quiet, sensitive, but it's so powerful inside of me. And I love who I am at my deepest levels, and I can trust myself. And that's where my voice comes from. So that's kind of a long answer to, well, when did you wake up, Doreen?
So, so what's interesting, so the introvert out extrovert analogy, I'm actually both, which is kind of confusing to some people because I'll be very expressive. I will be out there. I will tell you what I think. And then the very next meeting with folks, if you will, I'll be sitting back, processing what you have to say, listening to what's going on, right? So it depends. For me, it is situational, right? And it has nothing to do with comfort. It has to do with how much information do I feel comfortable. I guess there is comfort in knowing that I can contribute, right? If I don't know enough, or I'll give you another example, and then we'll talk a little bit more about introvert, extrovert. Um, I was managing this training department in an organization, and we went to listen to a department, and they laid out all of the needs that they had for us. And every single thing they said, we already had a training program for, right? And I sat there and I listened to what they had to say quietly. And when they were done, I said, so do you want me to kind of package all of this specifically for your group? And they said, that would be awesome. So they knew that we had the stuff. They just wanted it delivered in a certain way, right? So we got out, and my boss looked at me and she says, I don't think I've ever seen you quiet in a meeting. Right? But I had to listen, not to the words, because they never once said, package this for me. Right? I had to listen to what deeper it is that they were looking for, because I knew I already had what they needed, but I obviously wasn't delivering it to them in a way that they could consume it. Right. So,
I love what you're talking about in terms of listening, because obviously, as a psychologist, that's what I was, uh, you might say, trained to do, but I wasn't trained to listen in a deeper sort of way to what is either happening in the room, or the deeper listening to what is inside, that person in the deep in the park, so that I know that my traditional training as a psychologist from UC Berkeley in California was not this more transformational kind of work that I now do. Although I was working with somebody who, for several years, because I do long-term therapy with people, she, at one point, after I had gone through my own personal transformation and learned how to listen more deeply into people from my own inner depth,
right.
said one day, you know, this feels different. So, what we're talking about, I think, is how other people see us more when we are closer to this inner voice, this inner truth of where it comes from with listening.
Right. So what shines through, which is again back to some of the things that I alluded to when I see someone, see through the avatar, right?
Yeah.
So our avatar, people see through, right? What when we take the walls down, we allow the essence of who we are to shine through. So I'm on a little road trip, almost done. And I had lunch yesterday with some people that I've known for over a decade. But I haven't seen for, maybe 6 months because I do this road trip periodically. And one of them looked at me and said, whoa, you have changed. Like, you're like, where are you from? Right?
Mhm.
What have you been doing? What is going on?
Yes.
Right? Because when we start this inner journey, when we start the process, like I said, it gets easier and easier, but it also starts to become organic. I question everything. I go, well, what if this happened? Well, is that truth? Why is that truth? Because I don't believe there is truth either. I think truth is a story that we're telling ourselves.
Mhm.
Right. And so I know that I'm telling myself this story. So does this story resonate with me? Is that why I'm telling myself this story? Is it an ego story, or is it an essence or a soul story? Ooh, it's an ego story. Well, why do I want to tell myself an ego story? Right. I go through this in like a nanosecond.
Mhm.
Right. And so the journey of self-discovery, and guys, I don't ever do this alone until you get to the point where you're doing it yourself in a nanosecond, right? Absolutely seek help. And sometimes I've had as many as 5 coaches at a time, right? Um, and not looking for who's right and who's wrong. They all had a different facet that we were working on. Like one was definitely a personal trainer, another a nutritionist, right? And then, we go into working on me another way. Um, I have worked with folks who have worked with psychiatrists at the same time. And it's a beautiful thing because we look at things differently, though I don't think, Doreen, you do anymore. Um, and I'll make a suggestion and they go back and they tell their psychiatrist, well, so Gail suggested I do this and this, and I go, oh, try it, right? And I'll give you a quick story as an example. So I was working with a woman who's manic depressive. And, first of all, we took all of the things that she needs to do off of her wall. She had sticky notes in, take them down. How can you look at those every day and not feel terrible about yourself? Right. So we did some house cleaning, but most folks are like her suppress anger. Right. And so it's that anger is trying to come up. And so we had a conversation around anger, and she said, oh, I've never been angry in my life.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, that's really buried in there. So we need to bring anger out so we can talk to it. And she's like, um, I don't even know what that feels like. So, okay. So I went to the dollar store and I got plates and I brought them to her backyard and she had a brick wall. I said, I want you to take a plate and I want you to slam it against the wall and I want you to swear at the top of your lungs.
No.
Slam it. And she's like, oh, I can't do that. I said, well, you can. So I'm just going to leave these right here. And when you feel comfortable in just trying it, go ahead. So she finally did. And it was, Doreen, amazing. She called me. She goes, that felt so good. But now I am so angry at you because I have such a mess to clean up. And I'm like, yes, you should be angry with me. And there's nothing wrong. And so now she doesn't let anger boil up and she starts to feel her boundaries being crossed or trespassed in some way. She will call whoever it is and say, we need to have a conversation. This was not cool.
Mhm.
So much healthier than burying it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, for sure. What you're talking about with the lid on top of some part of ourselves that then by taking off the lid and at least looking in, you get to know when it's, like the range. Does the lid blow off? And it sounds like your process helped her at least blow off that lid. And then she was able to look at, well, what do I need to learn to self-regulate?
Right, right, right. So it was pretty amazing, pretty amazing. And this was early in my career. I mean, I want to say I've been doing this for over a decade, and this was probably 9 years ago. So I was pretty green in the process. But one of the things that I always did is listen to my instincts. And I have no idea why I suggested that, but I just felt it was the right thing for her to do and a safe thing for her to do.
Mhm.
Right. And so am I suggesting you guys go out and do that? No, you still need to work with someone,
Mhm.
right? And find an outlet that is your outlet, right? That works for you to get underneath that. Never, ever try to do this stuff on your own. It's very, it can be damaging to you. It can be damaging, but so much fun.
Mhm.
So much fun. So now, you went past Toastmasters, and I want to talk a little bit about those kinds of organizations, and talk about it's like peeling. They have their place. Like I didn't do Toastmasters, but I did a marketing coach, if you will, and she didn't teach me how to be on stage, but she taught me how to communicate in an organized way that's consumable. So how I could write a post a certain way and so forth. And I took that and expanded it. This is how I put a presentation together as well, right? And yes, I am trained to be on stage. I did take training for that, but different than Toastmasters. This was like I can be on stage with 800 people in the room and I know how to manage the crowd, right? That kind of stuff. I would not have been able to do that training if I hadn't first felt comfortable with being able to communicate, period. That training would have gotten me nowhere, right? And so, talk a little bit about your process you went through to feel comfortable on stage.
Yes, it was a lot of the inner work, some of what you've talked about is having dialogues with parts of myself that were afraid to, and why was I afraid, but also developing more of that embracing you're safe now kind of language inside of my own psyche. So that kind of inner work to what is it that you truly feel? That you want to feel? Like that whole exercise I talked about really being a deep listener inside of my own self. And there's a process called speaking circles and it was about transformational speaking. And that caught my eye. What does transformational speaking mean? That people who are listening in an audience could be transformed, or is it about me speaking in such a way that I transform myself? So that was the beginning, and it's called Speaking Circles, and it was started by Lee Glickstein in 90s, I guess, and that's when I joined that organization and became training director, and have traveled around the world globally and trained facilitators in Europe. I've been there over a dozen times, and Canada, about to go to Japan. So as training director, Speaking Circles International, the process is what I train is listeners, a group of listeners, because hello, I'm a psychologist. I know how to train people to listen more deeply without content. So you have a group of people quietly listening from the best they can, tapping down into their own hearts. So they're listening this is what we talked about a few minutes ago. What you're listening to is something other than content. You're listening to the essence of the person. So each person takes a turn in front of a group that you might say is just it's like illuminating the room with deep listening, and you finally feel safe, and you begin to find the quiet, that there's no expectations, you don't even have to speak. So putting my body, my mind, myself, all of me in front of us, it's not just a support group, it's a group that is listening for the best inside of me. And it feels like in that way, the group listens you into existence. So you get witnessed as the words start to come out from a different place, rather than fear. I've got to fill up the space. This is what they're expecting, so it's a whole different kind of training.
Well, I love
And
the witnessed word. I love that, being witnessed. So I want to touch a little bit on essence with folks, and I'll give you a little story, and then we'll get back to you. Again, years ago, I had a friend who is an essence coach, right? And she had a little event, and I went to support her. And what the exercise is, we all walk into this conference room, and there's someone with a flip chart, and each person gets the group to look at you and say, when I see you, here's the essence I see. And the person on the flip chart is writing that down, right? And it's all about what are you projecting when you walk in? Well, the person writing on the board, it was her turn. And I said, well, I'll write on the flip chart while you have, so you can be fully engaged in what's going on. Every time I turned around and looked at her, I saw fireworks. I'm like, well, that's crazy. I'm not going to say anything. And I turn around, fireworks. Like, Gail, what's going on here? Wrote some more turnaround. So I finally said, listen, I have to say, when I see you, I see fireworks. So I wrote fireworks. She started laughing. At the end, she came up to me. She goes, all right, this is crazy. But just before coming into the meeting, I hit the ladies' room and realized I had fireworks underwear on, and I was concerned someone was going to know. So her mind was
Um,
so involved in being concerned about the fireworks, right? And so whenever we see each other at an event, she comes up and says, so what am I wearing today?
yes.
Right? But that is how powerful our mind is and how projecting, what you say about projecting essence. Like if you're concerned about judgment, that's what you're going to project.
Mhm.
Right. And so by you and the group that you're with creating this safe cocoon, people can start dropping that avatar, that facade, right? And let their true essence come out. And it does take feeling safe and secure to do that. So how do you go from a cocoon that's safe and secure and on a stage where you don't know who's out there?
Oh, it's a lot easier than people think. Although in I have a 3-month program where I teach that very thing, as well as my 7 secrets that I talk about in the book, to fearless speaking. You have to first, I mean, it's like babies learn to crawl first, right? So you have to go to a place where there are no expectations, where you can learn to kind of move around in an environment with your body and you're feeling your voice coming up as opposed to coming from your head, and feeling the difference of speaking with no fear.
Mhm.
And so your body, I call it the inner presence muscle, the IP muscle. Your body begins to develop inside this presence muscle. And like any muscle, it needs to be it needs to be strengthened over and over and over again, like going to a gym. And that's partly what I do. I have a group that meets and we practice speaking, without that kind of trying to impress or make impact all the way that
Mhm.
a lot of speakers are out there on a stage, because a lot of people in my groups are never on a stage. They're just happen to be maybe at a dinner table, afraid to, be more fully expressed at a dinner table with their extended family.
Right. Or in a meeting in the office.
Definitely in meeting in the office, work
Right.
with a lot of people who are afraid to speak up in their meetings. But so your question about, well, then you're in a safe environment, you're a cocoon, and I'm saying it's like going to a gym. You build your muscle and then you go out, you could lift that 50-pound suitcase. If you've not gone to the gym and developed your muscles, you're not going to be able to do that. So that it is something that people question a lot. Well, how can I do this out there? And the trust, so it's like, well, okay, let's pick just one safe, a challenging situation out there, and begin to practice what it feels like to stay in your body, present, grounded, really full presence with the breathing, dropping down, down, down. And we do some exercises about how the feel of voice resonating, which I'm doing right now. Notice,
Mhm.
is my voice coming from more of a sense of where my belly is, which it is right now. And it feels really good.
Doesn't it?
Good. Yes, yes, yes. So I feel like I have a stronger, quieter voice right now because it's coming from a deeper part of me. And that's the transition. You don't just throw somebody in the deep end of the pool. It's a slow kind of gradual process. And what I love about it's so different than the kind of speaker trainings out there, is that it's for everybody, because we all speak
Right.
all day long.
All day long. And communication, the facade of communication is so important. But what I love is that you're teaching people or I don't even want to say teaching because we have to accept the lessons, but you're offering the
Mhm.
opportunity for people to practice the deeper communication because what you say and what you project may not be the same,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Right? And if I know what you're projecting, I know where you're really coming from, I can make a much better choice on how to communicate back and how to manage the situation or not, right? Right? Because there are situations where you hear that you've heard not my monkey, not my circus, right?
Yes.
Right? So, it's very harsh saying, but the fact of the matter is that's what I do. It's like, ooh, this has nothing to do with me. I can't fix it because it has nothing to do with me. So I have to I love you where you're at. I love you where you're at, and I had a, dear friend who taught me that lesson. I so much wanted to fix her. I so much wanted to help her. She's multiple personality. She was a functioning alcoholic. And she's passed. So many complex issues around her. Um, and it wasn't long in my first getting to know her that I realized I cannot fix her. That's her job. But I can still love her,
Mhm.
right? I can still enjoy her. I can still learn from her. I can still, have her be part of my life. And hopefully her experiences with me are positive enough that they help her manage through the experiences that are not wonderful because they
I
come
love
back up.
what I love what you're saying right now about your courage to be you and not be the fixer, the helper, and just come back to this idea that I have about radiating your own essence is healing just for those around you.
Right, as much as possible before she passed. And by the way, she's the reason I do these podcasts.
Mm.
Right. So that's the first time I've said that out loud. Uh,
Oh,
um,
uh-huh.
before she passed, of course, she had Alzheimer's. She, was bulimic. I mean, you name it. She was self-destructive. And when we met the last time, she gave me a journal and she said, "Who were we? I don't know who that was
Oh,
during this time." So I read the journal and I told her what was going on in her life at that time. And then she asked me to write our story.
mm,
And I knew she didn't have much time when I saw her. It was just a couple of weeks. So instead I did a meditation and I brought her to our favorite place of hanging around.
uh-huh.
And we walked the beach and I told her our story as we walked the beach in the meditation. And that was a way for me to get it to her quickly, for her to listen to it. And apparently she played it before going to sleep and she listened to it frequently, and share our story because I would never have been able to write it out fast enough and get it to her before her passing on.
I love it because it's reaching other parts of the person in the brain, the whole kinesthetic and the
Mhm.
auditory, and rather than just reading, it's like the whole fullness and your voice too. I
Right.
think that's that's my work is about people finding their voice and how that voice then impacts those who around us and who we speak with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so um, there's always a way. And that's one of has always been my claim to fame, my claim to success. You have a challenge and the response is, well, I can't go there. Well, maybe not through that door, but you can get there. Right? Let's look at, my favorite thing is the perfect world. It's the perfect world. There are no constraints. You have all the money in the world. Nothing is stopping you. You maybe you're even a magician. How would this look? Not how would you get there? How would this look?
Nice. Yeah.
Right? And then, oh, so can't you get that look? Can't you get that feeling? Can't you get to that place? Oh, you can. Let's go. Right? And so it's all about the essence.
Yeah.
It's all
Yes.
about the essence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we can go on and on and on. This is
Right? We can.
I have lots of stories I'd love to come back to, but I know it's time. And one thing I would like to for sure just get in before we get off, though, is about how people hold themselves back because of some of the things that you're talking about, the roles that they play or their avatar, and that they believe that's who they are. And so somebody like, well, the people I work with have fear of speaking, and so they say, I was just born that way. Or, I tried at work and I goofed up and I failed and everybody laughed at me. And so I'm never going to try that again. And so, the ways in which the past encroaches on our present because you project it into the future and see the same thing being repeated. So what you just did there about imagining the future with your best self or your essence radiating, and that to me is the essence quality, seeing this inner core strengths and speaking from there. And it's just it's a transformational because but first you have to see that the past is encroaching on you now as you imagine your future.
Right. And so you have this program, you have this book, you have the 7 steps. Tell us a little bit about your book and how people can get in touch with you because they want to know more.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it is based on my journey, and it's also based on my experience as a psychologist. And I'm also a mindfulness teacher. So I've been trained in all 3 areas, bringing that together in this new approach to overcoming and breaking through the fear of speaking up, whether it's on a stage or even just one person at a time. Lots of fear expressing yourself to even loved ones. So the whole gamut of where we find ourselves needing to speak up and say what's true for us and handle life, right? Handle our lives. So that my programs I have a whole range of individual one-on-one, just a one-shot deal, or 3-month programs. I have the book, I have YouTube channel. I think the best place to start, if they wanted the secrets right now, the 7 secrets, the first one is be still. And people are going to say, how does that relate to speaking? Well, that's what my book is about. How being still, how being present gives you the inner strength to be yourself and speak without fear. So my website is essentialspeaking.com. I think that would be probably the start is if they sign up on my website, they'd get instantly those 7 secrets.
Very nice. Thank you, Doreen, for sharing your essence with me and sharing stories with me and just chit-chatting and sharing that with our listeners. And this is Gail Craft from the Empowering Process podcast. If there's something in this that resonated with you, please let us know. If a question came up, put a comment in there, and I'm sure Doreen and I would love to come back together and answer that question. If you know someone who could benefit from this, please do share it out with them. And as always, like us, subscribe so that you hear more about what's coming up. And from my heart to yours, this is Gail Craft saying goodbye from the Empowering Process podcast. Thank you so much, Doreen.
Thank you, Gail.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.